President Trump, of course, signing a $100 billion coronavirus relief package yesterday, providing paid sick leave, unemployment help, and free testing to Americans. This as the Federal Reserve is taking action by backstopping money market mutual funds. Futures, however, pointing to a decline at the open still. We are now looking at a decline of 385 points. This is well off of the lows of the morning. Joining me right now on the telephone is Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin. Mr. Secretary, thanks very much for joining us this morning. We appreciate all of your efforts and how hard you're working in the face of some real challenges. Let me ask you, it seems like you're putting everything, including the kitchen sink, on the table, and yet the markets are still selling off. There's real disappointment in your package, sir.
Well, Maria, first of all, it's good to be with you. I would say, as I've always said, I can't predict where the markets are today or tomorrow. What we're really focused on is providing liquidity to American business and American workers. I think, as you know, this is an unprecedented situation where, for good reason, the government has instructed major parts of the economy to close down so that we can win this fight against this virus. This is not going to go on forever. We are going to beat this. And while we're doing that, we understand there are impacts on hardworking Americans, and the president is determined that we are going to support them. So we've announced a $1 trillion plan. The first part of this is $300 billion that goes to small businesses. That money needs to be used to hiring people, keeping people on the payroll. And if they do, there will be loan forgiveness on that afterwards. The second component, and that's really important, Maria, that's 40% of the private workforce, and we want to keep those people employed. The second component, and
Sure.
I refer to this as checks in the mail, but it's really money direct deposited. Most people, we have all their information. And the plan is $500 billion in two tranches. The first one would be $1,000 per person, $500 per child. So for a family of four, that's a $3,000 payment. As soon as Congress passes this, we'd get this out in 3 weeks. And then 6 weeks later, if the president still has a national emergency, we'll deliver another $3,000. So that's a lot of money to hardworking Americans who are at home, no fault to theirs. And the third component is $200 billion that we can use for more facilities with the Fed, like we've been doing, for secured lending to airlines and for other critical industries.
Yeah, I mean, you just said a moment ago you can have this out within 3 weeks once Congress passes it. All morning long, Steve Forbes has been on this program saying we need something now. We need the Treasury Secretary to call the Federal Reserve and open up the window for small business now, so any company that has been solvent before this crisis can get a loan now. What about making sure you give the authority to the Federal Reserve to do something along those lines, sir?
Well, Maria, I think the Treasury and the Fed have been working literally round the clock this week. We've put out together, they've put out and we've supported with equity. There's 3 facilities. Last night, the press release came out at 11:30. That's because we were working super late last night to get this out. These are very important facilities. These support the money markets. We were very worried that hardworking Americans were going to find that they couldn't get their money out of money markets. I can assure you that the Fed and we understand their authorities. We are working together on them. And where we don't have authorities, we're going back to Congress. I've already asked that. So, we are focused on being able to provide liquidity to companies. That is our objective. And in certain cases, I think, as you know, certain powers were taken away from the Fed after the financial crisis, and powers that we need will get back. But the president is determined to go big and support the American economy.
Yes, and yet, even in this crisis situation, you have some, even Republicans pushing back, voting no yesterday on this because of debt, because of they don't think the package is realistic for business. So what are you going to do in terms of politics getting involved and the two sides can't come together and vote on this? That's why Forbes is saying, do this now, make sure the window is there at the Fed.
Well, Maria, let me just say, the things that the Fed and we can do, we will do. I don't want to go into all the comments on what Steve wants us to do. Some of these things we can do, some of these things we can't. But let me just say, there's a lot of bipartisan support. People are putting politics aside. This is about protecting the American economy. You had an overwhelming bipartisan vote in the Senate and the House The Senate is here working. They're working on this next package. We were on the phone round the clock with them yesterday, with Mitch McConnell and his team. I spoke to Chuck Schumer several times. I've spoken to the Speaker, even though she's not here. So I think everybody realizes there's going to be massive support for this economy on both sides of the aisle.
Secretary, let me ask you about what Bill Ackman is saying. Obviously, the hedge fund manager went on a tweet storm saying there should be no defaults, no foreclosures. He wants to see a 30-day rent, interest, and tax holiday for all. Are you considering a tax holiday? And what about his comments saying that the shutdown is inevitable? It is already happening, not in a controlled fashion, which is extending the economic pain. Please send everyone home now. Hell is coming, says Bill Ackman.
Well, I surely don't agree with him on the last part. I think we're doing everything we can, and we're going to get out of this quickly. But let me just say, yesterday I was very pleased to see Mark Calabria announce that both Fannie and Freddie are going to suspend foreclosures for 90 days. They're also going to issue forbearance. HUD did the same thing, so that's a giant part of the market. My expectation is on the banks will follow where they have things. So absolutely. First of all, we do not want to be foreclosing on people during this 90-day period, and we want to make sure we get liquidity to people. So there are parts of the economy that we have shut down. There's parts of the economy that are booming.
What about those industries that really need help in terms of what people are calling a bailout here? Larry Kudlow teasing the idea of the government taking equity stakes as part of that plan. Are you considering that?
Well, Maria, I would say, this isn't a bailout. So let me just, say that for small businesses, we're providing liquidity. If people have shut down their restaurants because they've been told to, that's not a bailout. We're doing things to encourage them to keep their workers. And as it relates to the big companies like the airlines, we're looking at making secured loans on market terms. So, we'll see whether that includes equity or doesn't include equity. Again, we're not going to force things on people, but people who need liquidity, we're going to make sure that the taxpayers are compensated fairly. But I can assure you the Fed, the president, are all 100% focused on providing liquidity to this economy. So, we've told the House and the Senate we need to get legislation done quickly. This needs to be done by the beginning of next week. And I think once you see more and more money coming into this economy, Americans are going to feel a lot better, and they're going to understand that this is a virus. We're going to get through this. This is not the financial crisis that will go on for years. We are going to destroy this virus, and our economy will come roaring back better than ever.
What are the measures in order to release money to various industries? Because, yes, I understand the airline industry is seeing zero business. I understand the cruise ships and even the banks. I get it. But Boeing wants money. I mean, specific companies may want money. What are the measures that you're using to as an allowance to release money to various industries if it's not a bailout?
Well, Maria, it's not a bailout because we have good companies that have shut down businesses for 30 days or 60 days or 90 days that are going to open those businesses. So there's going to be a lot of demand. This isn't about bailing out bad businesses. This isn't about banks that made bad loans. These are about very, very good companies that have been instructed to shut down. So they need liquidity. That's what they need. And in most cases, my expectation is they'll be able to pay back those loans. In the cases small businesses, if they can't afford to pay back those loans, we'll forgive them. I don't consider that to be a bailout. I consider that to be an incentive to keep workers hired.
Yeah, it seems like most people do not want to talk politics in any way, shape, or form. We have all hands on decks, and I applaud you and the administration to bringing business in to make sure to come up with solutions. But Robert Zoellick, former head of the World Bank, has a op-ed out this morning, and here's what he writes, Secretary. Trump's tariffs leave the U.S. short on vital medical supplies. He's blaming the president's tariff plan and program for the fact that we don't have the medical supplies that we need because all of this stuff is made in China.
Well, that's absolutely just not the case, okay? Ambassador Lighthizer has waived tariffs on any critical items. We've continued to do that on critical items. So that's just not the case. And I would say that we're doing everything to make sure the supply chains stay open. I want to compliment the medical professionals who are working round the clock. The testing, working with both private companies now as well as the government. I think the American public is going to have a lot more confidence as they see quick testing is rolled out. So we are doing an entire government-wide resources, and I can assure you that article is not correct about tariffs.
Yes, I know you are. What about the 50 and 25-year bonds to finance the relief bill and plans for more stimulus? Is this still on the table, Secretary?
Well, Maria, you know, we had given a lot of thought to 50-year and 100-year bonds, and we surveyed the market. We went to investors. We went to foreigners. We went to pension funds, and there was some demand for it. Given our desire to be regular and predictable, we decided that we could raise a lot more money at 20-year bonds, and that would extend our duration. And I can assure you we're going to take advantage of lower interest rates. The good news is we can refinance a lot of our debt at low levels, and we have no problem issuing more debt here. So we are determined to support this economy. And the most important issue is we now get this $1 trillion package passed, so we get money into the economy. And I think you'll see when hardworking Americans in business have access to credit, you're going to see a stabilization in this economy.
Look, Secretary, I know that we are in sort of a very sensitive and fragile moment in time, particularly going into these next couple of weeks where we're going to see the number of cases spike. Should we be ignoring economic data at this point? I mean, we just got the initial jobless claims number out. 281,000 jobless applications. You warned lawmakers that we could see unemployment spiking to 20% if action is not taken. Do you stand by that number still?
Maria, I want to clarify. So I was not predicting that. What I said is that 40% of our workforce is in small businesses. And I said if half of them were left off, let go, mathematically we'd be at 20% unemployment. So, again, what I've said to the lawmakers, and they understand this, is we want to keep those people employed. That is what is important to do. But I agree with you. The statistics in the short run of economics are obviously not relevant. This is an unprecedented situation where the government's direction, we've shut down parts of the economy, and now is the time that we provide government support. That's the role of the government.
So, you know, Bank of America is talking about 3.5 million jobs lost in the second quarter. There's a debate on how significant a contraction it will be in the second quarter, but we're talking about 8% contraction, 14% contraction if you listen to J.P. Morgan. Is it fair to say, from what we know today, that it's really the second quarter that's going to be the sharp contraction, or are you expecting this second and third quarter to be the bulk of it? What's your timing on this is the bottom line, Secretary?
I think you're going to see the second quarter down. I think people are speculating. Nobody has a good view of what it exactly is. I think you're going to see the third quarter pick up, and I think you're going to see a gigantic fourth quarter.
A gigantic fourth quarter, why? Because you think much of the worry over coronavirus will be behind? We'll have more clarity from the drug companies. Why would the fourth quarter see a gigantic rebound?
Because I have a lot of confidence in the medical professionals. We have the best medical system in the world. There's a lot of viral treatments that are in trials now that are proving very effective. I think there's more that are being developed. I think there'll be work on vaccines. So I think I think we're going to kill this virus, and we're doing all the right things now to make sure that it doesn't spread. And I think you're going to see a lot of pent-up demand. So I think you're going to see, when we get through the next few months and Americans see what's happening and we've killed this virus, people are going to be comfortable going back to work. We're going to be opening back businesses, and people are going to continue what they do. You know, they're going to live, they're going to shop, they're going to eat out, they're going to enjoy restaurants and travel and entertainment, and we will go back to a normal world.
Yeah, but there are some expectations that, for example, in the restaurant business, a third of restaurants will go away. You know that there are many companies that may not make it out of this, Secretary. What about the oil patch with oil prices where they are? How significant are you expecting the bankruptcies to be in the oil patch?
Well, Maria, let me just go back to the restaurants. If Congress passes our plan, the majority of these restaurants are small businesses with 500 people or less. And in our plan, there is money for those owners to keep those people employed. So we see no reason why those restaurants should be permanently closed. Those restaurants should be closed for a short period of time. The workers should be paid. That's only fair. It's not their fault. And those restaurants will be ready to open. Now, as it relates to the oil markets, I mean, let me just say this could not have occurred at a worse time, that this has nothing to do with the coronavirus whatsoever. So there's no question that there's both supply problem as well as the demand problem. I'm going to tell the president that my recommendation is that he goes to Congress and asks for a lot more money to fill the strategic reserve. At $22 for WTI crude, we should be filling up the reserve for the next 10 years. So, we are energy independent. Obviously, at these prices, we're going to have issues producing energy. So let's go out and buy $10 or $20 billion of oil, fill up the reserves. Again, the oil market has nothing to do with the coronavirus, other than there's just a lot less demand at this point. But you're right, unprecedented issues.
Yeah, no surprise Russia would pile on just in the middle of a crisis for the United States and say, I'm not going to cut production. Secretary Mnuchin, it's a pleasure to have you this morning. Thanks very much for the clarity. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Maria.